Hey everybody, it's Andy here to slap you upside the head with another piece of knowledge. Sure, that's what I do on these videos. I slap you upside the head with some knowledge. In this video, I'm going to go over data separation as it pertains to California divorces. If you are new to the channel, I am an attorney licensed to practice law in California as well as New York. And in California, I do a lot of divorces, other types of family law and stuff. So yeah, if you look on my channel, I have a bunch of other videos that go over a variety of other types of details about California family law. So data separation is not something that I've addressed previously. It's a really simple definition, so there's no reason for you to kind of be confused by it, if you're involved in a divorce, let's say. But unfortunately, I will kind of caution or kind of preface that the definition is simple, but it is unfortunately a bit vague. But I'll go over it and hopefully, you can kind of, apply it to your situation somehow. So why is the data separation important? It's important because California uses the community property division, property division system when it comes to divorces. I have a bunch of other videos on my channel that go over what community property is, problems that you encounter with community property when you try to use title documents, other problems that you might encounter when you try to actually apply community property in the real world. I'll try to link all those videos down below. I'll also try to fit them up here in a card, but yeah, hopefully they all fit, but if they don't fit up here, check down in the description. So when it comes to community property, the kind of nutshell definition is that anything that's acquired during the marriage, so during the marriage is the key part that I'm going to go over in this video, anything acquired during the marriage is community property, and unless it falls into an exception, generally will be divided 50-50 upon divorce. So during the marriage, that sort of implies a time period, right? Like, you're married for a certain amount of time, and anything acquired during that time is going to be community property that has to get split 50-50. So a duration, a time period, has a beginning date and an end date. So when does the marriage begin? Well, that begins, not surprisingly, on the date of marriage. Most people I've encountered will understand that because, obviously, if it begins on the date of marriage, they were there when they got married. So they kind of understand, okay, date of marriage, I know what that means. If you imagine the date of marriage being over here, and then afterwards the marriage kind of starts, I guess, at some point the marriage will end, right? Like, if it's during the marriage, there's going to be an end date of some kind. So there's going to be an end date, say, right here. What is that end date called? That's called the date of separation. So in California, during the marriage time, which in which community property applies, begins when you get married on the date of marriage, and it ends on the date that you separate. So date of marriage to date of separation, that's the time period within which community property applies. So as you can probably guess, date of separation, like, there might be situations where one party wants to argue, oh, no, we separated really early. So the time period, over which community property applies, it's really short. It's like this, right? And because of that, because it's a really short time period, I don't have to split a lot of stuff with her, for example. Or I don't have to give him a lot of stuff because, we were only married, quote unquote, for such a short time. Conversely, in those situations, hopefully you can imagine that the other spouse will want to say, no, we separated way long into the future, like way into the future. The during the marriage part's actually really long. It's like this. So there's a huge time period in which all these assets that we acquired, I'm entitled to half of that, for instance. So there's advantages, there's motivations rather, that's probably the better word. People will be motivated one way or the other to kind of, play loose with the facts a little bit to say, oh, no, we separated, this is our marriage versus this is our marriage and so on. So data separation is going to be something that people will try to argue about. The formal definition of data of separation is like this. It's in California Family Code section 70, which I'll write kind of up over here, as well as link down in the description for you. So California Family Code section 70 basically says that the date of separation is the date upon which one of the spouses deems the marriage to have suffered a complete and final break. Complete and final break, that's the actual wording from the statute. Practically speaking, what that means is that one of the spouses has deemed that the marriage has suffered a complete and final break. It can't be saved. The relationship is basically permanently gone. There's no way to rehabilitate or reconcile this. So the marriage basically is over. That's what data separation means. And the way that you determine that, or the way that a court determines that, is what has that spouse expressed, so their expressions, their speech, etc., and what has their conduct shown. So expression and conduct, those two are what the courts look at in order to determine whether or not a complete and final break has occurred. So in order to determine what is their expression, what is their conduct and stuff, the court can basically look at any evidence, like any relevant, admissible evidence, that's not privileged, etc. Basically, the whole kind of field of evidence is kind of fair game, I guess. Courts can look at basically anything to determine, has a complete and final break occurred, or did the parties really think that this relationship could be saved somehow? So complete and final break as evidenced by expression and conduct, that's kind of the standard that is applied in California for data separation to determine when that happens. So basically any evidence could theoretically be used to prove that the parties have separated, that they haven't, and so on. If you look at Section 70 of the Family Code, again, linked down below, you might see a reference to a case called Marriage of Davis. It's a 2015 California Supreme Court case called Marriage of Davis. Here's the reason why that case is mentioned in Section 70. It doesn't apply anymore, but just as a historical background. So prior to 2015, the data separation in California was defined as it is now, like basically when did one of the parties believe that the marriage was irretrievably broken, could no longer be saved, and so forth. In 2015, there was this California Supreme Court case called Marriage of Davis that basically redefined data separation as meaning, okay, you guys can separate, that's fine, but as long as you guys still live under the same roof, you're not separated. So in order to be separated, to end community property rights, you have to, or one of the parties has to move out. You have to live apart. If you live together still under the same roof, you're not separated, community property rights still continue. So as you could probably guess, there are a lot of parts in California that, the cost of living is very high. Basically the parties just financially cannot afford to live apart in a lot of cases. So basically it was a decision that I think logically and kind of legally made a lot of sense. Practically speaking, unfortunately, it made somewhat less sense. So basically, I want to say in 2018, maybe, basically 2 or 3 years after Davis came out, the California legislature passed Section 70 that I've been describing to basically reaffirm or to supersede and redefine the data separation as just the date upon which one of the parties deems that the marriage has suffered a complete and final break. So it returns back to the old definition, but if you kind of look at it over time, there's the old definition, there's like 2 or 3 years around 2015 or so, in which Marriage of Davis applied a different definition, and then since 2018 or thereabouts, Section 70 of the Family Code has basically gone back to the prior system. So there's 3 different time periods, but the current definition is Section 70 of the California Family Code, complete and final break of the marriage. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. To summarize again, the reason why data separation actually is really important in a California family law case, a divorce case, is because that's the date upon which community property rights end. And depending on your position, depending on the facts of your case, it might be advantageous to kind of say that the data separation was actually earlier versus later. Financially, in terms of asset division, that might be beneficial to you. Or it could be the other way. It might be beneficial for you to argue that the data separation is actually later. It probably would be easier to do either of those things if the criteria for data separation were more kind of definite, I suppose. But as it stands right now under Section 70 of the Family Code, complete and final break is the standard. And the courts can look at anything to see what that spouse expressed, what that spouse evidenced by their conduct, and so on. So that's it. Hopefully that helped. Go ahead and comment, share, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks.